Hey, Amanda.
Hey, Tommy.
Hey, do you know what February 2nd is every year?
It is Groundhog Day.
Hey, Amanda.
Hey, Tommy.
We did this before, right? This is like deja vu.
I think it is. It's definitely Groundhog Day.
That's what we're going to talk about today.
Can we talk about?
Hey, Phil? Phil Connors? Phil Connors, I thought that was you.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for watching.
Hey. Now, don't you tell me you don't remember me, because I sure as heck fire remember you.
Not a chance.
Needle-nosed Ned the Head? Come on, buddy. Case Western High. Ned Ryerson. I did the whistling belly button trick at the high school talent show. Bing!
Ned Ryerson?
Bing!
Bing! So did you turn pro with that belly button thing, Ned, or
No,
what?
Phil, I sell insurance.
What a shock.
Do you have life insurance? Because if you do, you could always use a little more. Am I right or am I right or am I right? Right.
Ned, I would love to stand here and talk with you, but I'm not going to. See you.
Hey, that's all right. I'll walk with you. Oh, God. It is so good to see you. What are you doing for dinner?
Something else. It's been great seeing you, Needlehead. Take care.
Watch out for that first step. It's a doozy.
Can we talk about Groundhog Day? The movie, to be specific.
Yes, we absolutely can. A Bill Murray classic.
Yeah, I watched this a lot when I was younger, and it's really funny. I watched it on almost repeat through my childhood, and then I rewatched it in prep for this podcast, and I hadn't seen it in I want to say 10 years. It's something crazy. I hadn't seen it in a long time, so it was very fresh for me.
It might be longer for me, honestly.
Yeah.
And did it hold up for you? Do you still love it?
I have different views of it because I was watching it, and I watched it with my kid, who, by the way, has an insight that I am so proud of him for.
Oh, I can't wait for this.
It's a different movie because I'm watching it. I'm like, oh man, how is he enjoying this? Because this is very much a romantic comedy with a random sci-fi twist. When I was younger, I think I very much focused on the escapism of, wow, what if you had one day to live over and over and over again and do whatever you want?
That's fair.
Was that the same for you or different?
Yeah, it had that Ferris Bueller vibe, right? Where as a kid, it felt like the fucking greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And as an adult, it's like, let me backtrack a little bit, because there were moments watching this, and I've now rewatched it twice in its entirety in preparation for this, but
Twice.
I wanted to just get that Groundhog effect. I was like, let's do it again. But I definitely there was a moment watching it today, so I wasn't paying attention as much, where I was kind of like, actually, it would be kind of sweet to suddenly be like a killer piano player, or speak French fluently, or, read all this beautiful literature. I wish that I could live to be 500 years old, because all the books that I want to read, I will never read in my lifetime. I know that. So I get all of that. Yeah. But then there is that heartbreak that goes along with it. So it definitely was different, because as a kid, it was like, this would be so cool. You could eat whatever you want, do whatever you want, and whatever, yell at you. You could drive fast cars and get arrested, but not be in jail.
I mean, I asked my kid what he would do, and his answer was he would eat candy, all the candy he wanted, and he'd play video games all day. I'm like, you do that now. Why that's not any different than your life today.
There'd be no repercussion. Nobody's saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. I get that. Maybe mine would be the same. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like this is something we should wait for the later for, but I can't hold myself back. So would you enjoy living the same day over and over again? After watching it, especially
Okay, so here's the caveat. What day? When Bill Murray is sitting there and he's like,
the bowling alley.
And he's saying,
Cabo.
I went to Cabo and I had this great day and blah, blah, blah. That's a day I'd love to live over and over again.
That would have been a great day to live over and over again.
That maybe, but I think a random day that I have no say in living over and over again, because there are, not to get really existential and, womp womp, but, there's people in your life that you've lost, or for me, my dog that I lost. I would love to go back into a time where I could just relive, knowing what I know now, appreciating those people and animals and life as it was. But I don't know. I just how lonely that must be.
Yeah.
Truly lonely.
That was the part that stuck out for me too in the rewatch was how lonely you have to be in this because, and you know, I mean, the gist of the movie I know we usually like stop and then like synopsis the cast and the movie and everything.
This is the most famous movie ever.
Yeah. And the gist of it is he's an asshole in the beginning.
Douche. Yeah.
He's a little
egotistical. Yeah.
Not far off from the real Bill Murray, apparently, as we were learning recently, but which is we'll touch on that later. But one of the things I almost like want to re-edit myself just to kind of see the contrast is the view from everyone else in his life in that town of like where they, you know, he gets dropped off at his bed and breakfast, goes to sleep, and then cut to like the final day we get to see him experience in loop of like what a different person he is. Because I think that was the thing too. It's like as he's going through it, I'm like Andie MacDowell's character just going along with like, oh wow, I'm getting to know the real you. I'm like, you spent the day with him yesterday. You already like it. You're not shocked by the fact that he's not a douche the second day you met.
Completely different. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so that's where I was like, I understand why it is hard. And you kind of, you know, they do play that up, but it almost makes it harder for me to believe the ending where she's just like, oh, wow, he is a whole different person I didn't know yesterday. It's glazed over a little bit, but either way, but yeah, I picked up on that a lot. And with that also, I think as a kid watching it, I didn't notice as much. Like I knew it was there, but I didn't notice as much about his journey from just going from I can do anything I want to I'm lonely as hell and I want to die to his sort of redemption arc of just deciding to be a good person. And then, oh, whoops-a-daisy. By doing that, Andie MacDowell fell in love with me without me even trying because I just worked on myself instead. So there is that arc, which is obviously that's the point of the story. But I didn't notice that as a kid. I'm just like, oh, wow, he's just trying different things. And like, I didn't notice that he's like.
For sure. As a kid, it was just like, oh, that's fun. He ends up with the lady with curly hair and the pretty smile. That's good. But did you see that scene where he got to eat all that cake and pie and ice cream in the diner? Like, I mean, you definitely capitalize and pay attention to more things as a kid. But I mean, there are certain things in this movie that just hold up and I giggle at. And I know I'm going to. That first scene where you cut to the groundhog holding the steering wheel on his lap, I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, this is just good old fashioned comedy at its finest. You're just laughing for the sake of laughing.
There are so many iconic scenes like that you from the like to you just mentioned like him shoving the cake in his mouth in one whole bite.
Way in, yeah.
And the reason I feel like it's iconic is. In hindsight, it was probably just like part of the commercial on TBS when they reran it every day, which is that still a thing? Because I vaguely remember, I don't know if I'm just making this up in my head, that like some channel would just play the movie on loop. Same thing with like a Christmas story on Christmas Day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I think maybe TBS just would play Groundhog Day over and over again on loop.
It feels correct.
Yeah.
It's on the nose. Why wouldn't you be?
You know, just go along with my own random
If not,
thought.
You're welcome, TBS. You should really take this to your people.
And funny enough, my mom was visiting me and I mentioned to her Groundhog Day and she's like, oh, do you know about and my mom even knew about like the behind the scenes drama with this movie, which I think has become more of a legend than the movie itself.
Yeah.
Which, do we want to touch on that? Because that's a whole other.
I feel like we should, only because, we'll talk enough about the movie and what people think it means and all that kind of stuff. But I think we should start with what most recently brought the movie to the forefront is because Ramis died in 2014, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was like the big thing is they finally squashed it after 20 plus years and, blah, blah, blah. And they got to.
On his deathbed.
Yeah. So, you probably know this way better than I do. So you tell that part of the story.
Yeah. So the legend as it lives today is that Bill Murray was sort of pegged down as being the only movies you're good in are the ones you worked on with Harold Ramis, which is a lot of his movies, right? Including Stripes, Ghostbusters, right? Any of the movies that he's like probably more well known for. It's Harold Ramis is there in the background pulling the strings, writing.
This feels real. Will Ferrell, Adam McKay.
Yeah, right. Oh, wow. I didn't like think that.
Yeah, it's a little parallel.
Also from SNL. And so they had a sort of falling out in like the late 80s. Well, they didn't have a falling out then. Things were getting tense. then this was the movie where everything came to a head, where I think Bill Murray was going through a divorce at the time as well. So he was just like high strung. Even before that, not to make any excuses, Bill Murray was, as much as we love him from our childhood, he's not the nicest guy. And even I think through the early 2000s, there's all like the stories of like, Bill Murray showed up at my birthday party and made sure no one took pictures and no one will ever believe this. Like those kind of stories that like floated around for a couple of years. And that is the kind of guy he is, where he would just like do random things and just because he felt like it. But, if you say that with a different tone on it, it's like he would just do things because he felt like it and he didn't care what people thought. Very different tone when you put it into context of like working with people or women he's working with or things like that. So everything came to a head on the set where Bill Murray just like didn't want to shoot scenes. And also, as a side note, watching this and realizing that they had to shoot essentially variation versions of the same scene over and over and over again. I was thinking the
same thing. How irritating as for an actor. Yeah. I mean, for everybody, honestly, but
yeah, like knowing how the sausage is made in movies and stuff. Think about the fact that everyone like Andie MacDowell, Bill Murray, Chris Elliott, who by the way, I want to touch on him too because I love Chris Elliott and
we are big Chris
Elliott fans. Mention. But had to show up to. I mean, how many days do you think they had to film in the town square set right there with the entire crowd around them, doing that same shot over and over and over again? In the same
costume over and over and over again. They're so
Like, let's say that's
monotony.
And it had to be done in a way where it's like the same time of day or like the same lighting and stuff. So let's just assume, conservative estimate, they had to shoot that exact same spot, exact same scene for like 2 weeks, right? Knowing how movies are made and how many scenes that's included. So the fact that there was any tension on the set is, not excused, but it's like that alone, I feel like anyone would crack under. But I think the most famous part of the story is that Bill Murray was just being very difficult, wouldn't show up to set, would be late. And obviously they're already dealing with the fact that they have these locations locked down for God knows how long. And I think things came to a head when finally Harold Ramis literally grabbed Bill Murray by the collar and like pushed him against a wall and like argued with him like, you're filming these scenes, and they got into it. After the movie was finished filming, they didn't speak for over a decade. And
20 years, it says, other than like, I like that it notes like, other than the occasional wake or bat mitzvah.
Yeah.
Just, okay.
Keep in mind, and if you think about it, Bill Murray sort of disappeared for a couple years in his career following this, and then sort of shows up in some like Wes Anderson movies in like the late 90s and some things. So, didn't fully disappear. I don't want to say it's that, but after Groundhog Day, he did Ed Wood, he did Kingpin, he did Larger Than Life and Space Jam. He did a few things. He was doing studio comedies at that point. It wasn't him working with his writing partner on anything. So I think that has a little bit to do with it. But and then in 2014 on his deathbed, they finally made up before he passed. And I don't put it past Bill Murray on the fact that like he really did care about his friend, and it was all over.
Yeah.
Kind of some egotistical bullshit.
Yeah, I had read an article on the 20th anniversary. So that was what, 25th anniversary. So it was 2018.
Yeah.
And that he had, Bill Murray wanted it to be like very philosophical and more comedic.
Yeah.
And, Ramis wanted to be more on the rom-com side. And it to his genius.
Yeah. That
is, I think, what makes Groundhog Day kind of one of those movies that couples can sit down and they both enjoy it.
Yeah.
The wife's getting the rom-com, not to be stereotypical or sexist, but, more often than not, that's kind of where it ends up. Especially this, I will say, for the time period that this movie came out in, those stereotypes were alive and well. Yeah. And you're getting Bill Murray in the seats by having Bill Murray. So every guy and comedy fan's going to see it. And then you've got Andie MacDowell, who's like in her prime, beautiful. Andie MacDowell is like just like a butterfly that floats into scenes.
Yeah.
And I think that it definitely crossed both barriers. And it was a great comedy. Like when I think of it, is it a rom-com? Sure. But to me, it was always a comedy. I think more to when I was an adult, saw it as a rom-com.
Oh, yeah. And same here. I mean, when I sat down with my kid to watch it, I was just like, oh, you'll like this. I gave him no context whatsoever. I'm like, it's a comedy. And then because I remember as a kid, too, I'm like, oh, that's Peter Venkman from Ghostbusters, and you're saying this is a funny movie. Yeah, I'm in. I'm locked. You got me. So, yeah, even like just that terminology. But I agree with you. And if he was going for a little bit more philosophical versus rom-com, there is a balance there. Like that, I fully think about. I think there is like a perfect balance.
For sure.
Of that in this movie.
I think that was organic, don't you? Because people really treat this as philosophical.
Yeah. I mean, you immediately go, what would you do? What are your feelings? And everyone has
Absolutely.
different answers, and everyone has, and then I got, so this is what I'll mention, right? Because this is an important thing that I never thought about when I was younger, when I used to watch this as a kid. It was a part of internet debate for a couple years ago, and Harold Ramis has an opinion on it, which again, you know my take on things. If the director said it, if the the creator said
it's gold, baby.
That's canon now. How long he was looping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny.
Yeah.
Because my son, before anything had happened, had an answer. And I think two things. One, okay. I feel like that was the intended answer. And two, I give my kids so much praise for coming up with this, but here's the answer, right? As he's looping and my son is like, oh, he's like in a loop. It's because 6 more weeks of winter. The Groundhog says 6 more weeks. And it's funny because at the end of the movie, I look it up and I'm like, all right, so here's the answer. I was like, there, officially the amount of scenes that we know about based on how many times it resets and everything is something like 42 days. I mean, I think you probably have the numbers up in front of you. And my son goes, yeah, that's 6 weeks. If that was the intended answer of, they open the ground, like it's happening in the background, because I think that's the one part of the movie that bothers people is like, why was he in a time loop? What's the answer? Why was this happening to him? And you don't really have any answer, which I also think is a good thing. I'm fine with not being spoon-fed answers in movies and just being like, it happened to him.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Just go with it. At the same time, I'm like, holy shit. Like if he really did loop for like 42 days and it's about 6 weeks, and that connection to like, they pull out the groundhog, he doesn't want to be there. And, not to say it's like turning into some like family comedy where it's like the groundhog has magical powers. The groundhog is like 6 more weeks of winter. But I was like, I feel like that's so close that like in the scenes they wrote and all the loops, and I'm like,
what does he say though? What does Ramis say?
What does he say?
Ramis, what is it? What do the people, the powers that be say?
Yeah.
I read something where he said he thought it was closer to 30 to 40 years.
Yes. Right. Okay. Because the answer that what eventually came out too was Harold. There's a few different things that happen in the movie that you get out of the movie versus like what people have kind of come up with from other areas. The answer from the movie, there's no answer from the movie, but one random fact that gets mentioned is when they're sitting on the bed together and tossing playing cards into the hat. Andie MacDowell says, how'd you get so good at this? He's like, oh, you just do this every day for 6 months and you'll get really good at it.
4 to 5 hours a day is I think what he says. Yeah.
So it's like, all right, beyond what we already know, or maybe involved in that, somewhere in there, he spent at least 6 months sitting on a bed, tossing cards into a hat. Okay. You have that. The other thing that happens too is obviously like he learns a bunch of other things. He learns how to play the piano. He learns how to speak French. There's a bunch of other things he learns, and like people essentially time box like how many hours it takes you to master something.
Yeah. Let's Malcolm Gladwell this.
Yeah.
He do not become that level of pianist that he is in that scene in, a short amount of time.
I will say it does bother me that at a point he goes and meets the piano teacher. He's like, I'll give you $1,000 right now to teach me the piano and pick up from where I left off. And you have two scenes, one where he walks in and has no idea how to play. Another where she's like, oh, you're not bad for someone. You said this is your first lesson. And then the next time we see it, he's playing at the big party at the hotel. What annoys me is that obviously every day resets, right? So the teacher's there. She's like, oh, I'm his piano teacher. I'm so proud of him.
I thought the same thing. I literally this time I was like, guys, who wrote that line and thought we weren't going to notice?
Right. Like he's basically an expert and then goes to her and says, hey, I want you to teach me more piano.
Essentially, he had his first lesson that day with her.
Yeah.
So that's not,
So, all right, chill out. Like you guys went overboard just to shoehorn in a random joke and that wasn't even a joke. I don't know. It was not needed. Let's edit that out. Tying all that together, I think Harold Ramis said it was probably closer. I forget his exact words, but yeah, there was anywhere from between like 10 years and then you get to like 30 years. But even if you conservatively say the 10 years, right?
Yeah, he refuted that in the article I read. He was like, it's not 10 years. This was 2009. Yeah. He said it's not 10 years. It's closer to 30 to 40 years.
Right.
And in the original script, that Ruben wrote, he said that he was looping for 10,000 years.
Yes.
And he marked the time. Yeah. And he was marking the time by reading the bed and breakfast library books every day, one page, or like reading one page and marking it so he could count how many pages he read.
Wow. Yeah.
Which that would have been a little, I wouldn't have loved that.
Right. And
I'm glad that didn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the movie kind of tilts, and you can take the same concept, right? By the way, very clearly, this is not the only movie to ever do that, because kind of funny enough, if you take the concept of this movie and like the movie Passengers, you essentially get Palm Springs, which was an actually really good movie too, right? But like same concept, time loop. It's a really good movie. Go watch it.
It's been out long enough. People get with it.
You don't know, and we do really good recommendations here. I don't want to spoil people. I didn't really spoil too much, but go watch the movie Palm Springs. Really good movie, despite it being Andy Samberg. But back to Groundhog Day. Yeah, that's where I'm like, at that point, I would just be driven crazy. I don't know, but I guess there is a concept of it's gone on so long that this is just my life now. I'm just going to learn to live with it. But he becomes a better person.
He does, but there's some scenes that truly broke me as an adult watching them that I just kind of didn't care about as a kid.
Yeah. The homeless guy?
As a kid, I was really concerned about the homeless guy. And I remember that. Like, I got really upset. Like, does he die? How come in the end they don't tell you what happens to the homeless guy? Does he ever save him? What happens?
You know what it is, by the way? It's that scene when he's at the diner and he sees the food and he looks up and he has that big smile on his face.
And then he passes him the soup and he says it gets hard at the end.
And then at the same time, like a
tuna melt or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just that smile on his face. He shows Bill Murray and then goes back to the food. Like, wow, this is the greatest day of my life. And that's the part that breaks your heart. Yeah, absolutely.
So it took me a little time to put this together. When I was a kid, for some reason, I was convinced that was Bill Murray's dad or Phil's dad in the movie.
Because he says Pop.
He says Pop.
Yeah.
And like watching it this time, I was like, oh, that's why little me thought that he found his homeless father. I was like, oh, his daddy dies in front of him. Yeah. But that was really emotional as a child and still emotional as an adult. But I was definitely that kid that just found the saddest thing and hooked onto it.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought was really interesting doing research for this, and you know me, I love my fun facts, but
I love fun facts.
There was such a debate about what do you think broke the loop for him. I truly didn't kind of ever think, oh, what broke the loop? And I was like, oh, he just became the very best version of himself and that broke the loop. But then reading into it, everyone thinks he was a very good version of himself to everyone else, except for that one insurance guy who he went to high school with. And it didn't happen until he finally was like, change that guy's life. You know, he says to him, this is the best day of my life. Like you changed my life, buying incidental dismemberment, fire, water damage, all this insurance from him. And then that night is when essentially Andie MacDowell stays into his bed. The next day he wakes up and she's still there. So the interwebs has told me that's what they think. But I don't know.
But here's my only issue with that is, which, by the way, Stephen Tobolowsky, I can't pronounce his name. My mouth doesn't allow me to.
I love him. He's so good at that.
He is amazing. And by the way, it's really funny. He's another one of those people that, like, anytime anyone's had any stories about him, it's always been he is a super nice guy. I had the same thought, right? I thought it was he reached the best version of himself, which, by the way, I actually was, when I was a kid, I was just like, oh, she fell in love. And that's why it broke the time loop. But I have a little theory here. And again, this is me more trying to be like get a screenwriter credit on the movie. Because I'm like, I feel like there's an answer there that you can easily explain in a nice tied up bow part of the plot. But two things. Number one, that day you see him running around saving everyone's life and being the best version of himself isn't supposed to be the first time he's doing that. Because there's a few things he mentions when he catches the kid. He's like, you never thank me.
Yes.
Like,
so
he mentioned, like, right. So at this point, we're supposed to be like, he's been going through this loop and like, he's reached this version of himself. And he doesn't even seem interested in Andie MacDowell. Like when they're kissing outside by the ice sculpture. I mean, adult me is looking at it being like, oh, cool. He went from like being a predator, like grabbing onto her, but like, you want to do this, to like actually being like,
he was extra rapey. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Little rapey vibes there. And then he ends up back at the place with her. But there's something kind of funny too, because there's a few different mentions of things where I'm like, I do believe in my heart of hearts that what breaks the time loop is her falling in love with him.
I think that's what I thought.
Right.
I'm with you, because the music of every 90s rom-com, when they're kissing, and it's like the little sparkle music, they play that when they're kissing, which in every something type of movie ever created, when that you hear that little jingle, that little sprinkling note, the magic has been lifted. So that's what I thought.
And I think that's right. But I think the little tying the bow on it would be like, why her? Like, what makes her so special? And there's a mention, he says, when it's snowing out, he mentions something along the lines like, you look like an angel.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so like, what if that's the answer? Because like, she is like this nice person, like she is the best of the best, or supposed to be the best person in his like little world. And so like, so that's what I'm like, if she's an angel, I'm not trying to get too sappy here, but like, I was like
Touched by an Angel in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so anyway, that was my hypothesis for like,
oh, that's pretty good.
Why is it so important for him to fall in love with her, or her to fall in love with him rather? Or you can look at it the other way, is that he finally fell in love with her. Any other time he actually says, I love you to her, she's like, you don't even know me. Like, like she kind of recoils a little bit. He says, I love you to her. She doesn't reciprocate, but in the final loop, he does say, I love you, and she doesn't say anything. She doesn't recoil. She just kind of goes with it. So I don't know.
I mean, I like that better.
I like movies that leave interpretation. I do like that.
There's so much interpretation with this movie. I mean, everybody has a theory on what they think this movie was supposed to mean existentially, and what was this supposed to mean. What is happening here? What's the metaphor? I think that Harold Ramis says that he thinks it has to do with mental health and how people enter a state of psychosis and how they can work through mental health and how it's really important. To me, I think it's more just a classic story of be the better person, you know.
Yeah.
What would you do if you had a chance to continue to be a better person? But I saw something, not to get very religious, about how it was a lot of religious people and religious sects have argued over, I don't know, this is a perfect example of being reborn. And every time you're reborn, you're a better version of yourself and all these different things. And it's like, I guess you could go there, but when Bill Murray's involved, I'm not going to go there. So
yeah, at that point too, maybe I'll rescind my thought that maybe she's an angel and that was the whole reason, because I feel like I'm getting too close to.
That's okay. I read a theory today that someone said that they thought it was purgatory. And he actually died, and this was he was stuck in between heaven and hell, and that was his purgatory. In order for him to get to heaven, she's an angel, he had to get to that point where he'd be accepted into heaven. So, I mean, we could go anywhere with this.
So I'm not the only person to ever
you're not the only person to say that. I saw one in the same article that they said that the groundhog was Jesus. I couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah. I'll take it. The most upsetting part about this, because I think everyone watches this and they're like, oh, wow, the town looks really cute. The festival looks really fun. Maybe I'll go to Puxatawny and like go see the.
It's not even shot there.
It's not shot there at all. It's shot
That's
in Illinois.
So depressing.
I know, isn't it? That's the one that breaks your heart. It was shot in Woodstock, Illinois. And they looked for a bunch of towns. I mean, I don't know at this point. I guess even funnier is, does Woodstock, Illinois now have a groundhog they pull out of the hat?
I don't know, but did you read that the people of Punxsutawney were so fucking pissed because they thought this is like their big break that they said you are not allowed to use the actual Punxsutawney Phil at all in this movie. So the groundhog that they have is no Punxsutawney Phil.
Wow. Even he has
it is a groundhog named Scooter that apparently bit Bill Murray 3 times, and Bill Murray claimed that Scooter hated him since the day he met him.
Yeah.
Just so you know. There is actually a plaque commemorating the puddle that he steps into in Woodstock, Illinois, and it just says, Bill Murray stepped here.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, pretty fucking funny.
So many times. Wow. Yeah. I mean, what's funny, I mean, I'm more curious about it because I feel like that's the thing. It's like one of those things where, I mean, why didn't they film it in Puxatawny? I mean, is it just it's not very film worthy?
No, this is on my fun facts list. And it was because they did not have a town center that looked good on camera. They tried. Yeah. They tried. And then it says Punxsutawney got their revenge by banning Punxsutawney Phil from appearing in the movie.
If there's a movie about your town that's literally about someone being stuck there.
Yeah.
And you know, look around. If they're like, yeah, no, your town doesn't look like something we want to show on a movie. It doesn't look fun. We're trying to set a tone about a movie with someone going through either a mental crisis or existential crisis and living in your town.
Can we talk about how dark it is, though? Like, it's, again, one of those things. It's like we talked about in Ferris Bueller, where you don't see as a child.
Yeah.
But the amount of times that he says he commits suicide and just seeing him continue to commit suicide, that is really fucking dark.
And he mentions in the diner scene at the TikTok diner, he mentions a few other ways he killed himself.
Yeah, he's like, I've been burned. I've been something. He names a bunch. Yes.
And I was like, when I was in the burning, I was like, why would you choose that? That hurts. Like that's gotta hurt, right? No.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't know. I just feel like that is something that would not fly in today's day and age. And even saying commit suicide, I know I apologize because I know that's, not the proper terminology anymore, but he's so like, it's just part of the comedy almost, which is just not, that would not fly. I mean, a lot of this movie would not fly today, but
I think it's more Bill Murray smirking at the camera when he does things.
For sure.
He makes anything, he brings anything to a comedy. I mean, it's literally him with a groundhog driving off a cliff with
but
like
Andie
a smirk on his
MacDowell
face.
and Chris Elliott are just like, oh no, Phil, don't do it. I'm sorry. If I saw my coworker driving a truck off a cliff with a stolen groundhog, I would be losing my fucking shit.
Yeah.
And she's just like, oh no. And Chris Elliott's like, he was a good guy. He was a good guy.
I will say she didn't really show any emotion of him driving off the cliff.
Zero.
She was just more like shot. Yeah.
So in 24 hours, she's fine with him driving off a cliff, but in the same 24 hours, she can fall in love with him and change her life.
Yeah. She's easily swayed.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, Andie MacDowell's like such a little cutie in this movie. I love that.
Yeah.
Did you know? Fun fact for the pod, Tom Hanks and Michael Keaton both turned down the part.
Really?
Yeah.
Were there reasons given, or just they weren't into it? Or?
So, I mean, Tom Hanks said he was busy, which I'm sure he was. He's Tom Hanks, and Michael Keaton.
I could have seen Tom Hanks doing this, by the way.
For
that
sure.
Makes sense.
Michael Keaton said he didn't understand the script, and then he was later interviewed saying it was he definitely regrets it.
Well, funny enough, he did the other movie with Andie MacDowell and Harold Ramis a couple years later, which was Multiplicity. Which
great movie.
I love that movie.
I love that movie.
I grew up watching that movie. And now that we've, as some may call us woke, you look back on some of those scenes and be like, hey, wait a second. There's some questionable things here.
I know.
Yeah. How many people are sleeping with his wife? Anyway, I won't get into there's your fun moral debate about what was actually happening there. But I'm wondering if that's also why Michael Keaton was like, yeah, okay. Harold Ramis comes to me and says, I have a rom-com that with a sci-fi twist, start with Andie MacDowell as the female lead. I'm not going to turn this down twice now. So
for sure. And he did okay. I mean, he didn't do Groundhog's Day okay, but he did okay. One of my favorite things, and I'm sure you'll admit about this and agree with, is it has literally become part of our vernacular. It is something you hear, just like Groundhog's Day. Like, such like a corporate monotony. You go into work like, hey guys, how you doing today? Oh, it's just like Groundhog's Day. Do the same stuff every day. And my brother-in-law said that. He was like, I got to watch this movie because every day these guys come into the shop and they say like, oh, just like Groundhog's Day. And he's like, it's the same guys. They come in and do the exact same thing every morning. The same guys take a shit before they go out every morning. And I've never seen Groundhog's Day, and I just agree with him. Yeah, it's just like Groundhog's Day.
Wait, there's something I gotta stop you right there, though.
Okay, I'm ready.
Something you said that I didn't even realize until after I saw the movie and I was doing prep for the actual podcast, like our fun facts and things. It's Groundhog Day, not Groundhog's Day.
Oh, okay.
I've always been like, it's Groundhog's Day. It's his day. This is it's his time to shine.
It's his day. Yeah.
No, it's Groundhog Day. Singular.
Well,
I know we've been saying it wrong. I say that not in like a trying to correct you. I'm saying it in we've all been saying it wrong. Every one of us
across the board.
Right. Universally, every single person has been saying this wrong for years. If you say Groundhog Day and you've been saying it like that, you're not normal. You're an outsider. We've all been getting this wrong for years.
But okay. So I'm even saying in my head like, oh, happy Groundhog Day, because my stepdad is born on Groundhog Day. And I've always been like, he's born on Groundhog's Day.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to pause you for a second. This is because this is a really silly question of mine. Is it always on the same day? Because I was always like,
February 2nd. Every year.
It's always February 2nd.
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was something where it's like the second February or second.
Yeah, like
Tuesday.
a Mother's Day, Father's Day situation.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good to know that I've been off this whole time. February 2nd. Got it.
You won't forget it now.
Now I won't.
And on February 2nd, you'll be like, wow, this is just like Groundhog Day.
It doesn't belong to him. Yeah. It's for all the groundhogs.
Maybe it's because there's so many Punxsutawney Phils. I wonder how many there have been, because how many do you think there have been? Phil's got to have died.
What's the lifespan of a groundhog?
I mean, not as long as he's been. I mean, this poor guy too.
Yeah.
Let's see how many there's been.
Do we also know why we have Groundhog Day? Like where it came from? Like,
no, we probably should. There's been one. What? This doesn't make sense.
How long do they live? There's a secret.
The lifespan of a groundhog is 6 to 8 years, and
let's say
this groundhog has been making weather predictions since 1887. What in the shit?
They just swap them out. They just throw them. This one's down. Throw them in the burn pile. We'll get a new groundhog.
Well, you know how you Google things and it like gives you suggested questions?
Yeah.
Does Punxsutawney Phil live forever?
Yes, absolutely. How do you think? Do you think a regular groundhog with no superpowers?
Apparently, there's only been one Phil. There's only been one Punxsutawney Phil.
Are they different names?
That's
now?
what they. No, this is what they say. According to the official website, Punxsutawney Phil gets his longevity from drinking groundhog punch, a secret recipe. One sip, which is administered every summer at the groundhog picnic, and gives him 7 more years of life. This is the biggest fucking crock of shit. This is worse than Santa. This thing, since 1886, also, we've just had one. That makes real sense.
I don't know if I was paying more attention because I was, doing homework this time around, but I didn't realize that part of their little speech, and I guess it's also part of the folklore of the real ceremony, but they refer to it as Punxsutawney Phil spoke to them in Groundhogese, which is his language. Okay. So that's why no one else understands when he's like 6 more weeks of winter, because he's speaking his own little language.
So this is apparently to where this came from. When German settlers arrived in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania in the 1700s, they brought a tradition known as Candleman's Day, the point between the winter solstice and spring equinox.
Okay.
Something. Superstition held that if the weather was fair on the midpoint day, the second half of winter would be stormy and cold. Germans watched for badgers to cast shadows. The Pennsylvania Germans chose the groundhog as a replacement.
We don't have no badgers.
Ain't no badgers around here.
We don't need no stinking badgers.
Okay. Well, you know what, badgers? I'm sorry you lost a job. That's a whole workforce put out.
On Netflix, they have like that Movies That Made Us. I think they did an episode on this movie.
They did? I would have watched it.
You did? Okay.
That. No.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sad I didn't do that. I apologize, everyone.
Well, the big takeaway from that was the guy who wrote it. It was a lot more. There was no rom-com element to it originally. It was fully a sci-fi kind of, this man's day is looping over and over again.
That's where the 10,000 years came from, right? He wanted it to go on for much longer.
So. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. To tie my job of making alcohol to the episode that we're doing, Andie MacDowell drinks sweet vermouth on the rocks with a twist. What in the shit? That is disgusting.
Wait, explain this drink to me, because again, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't understand. What does that look or taste like? Or
there's scenes where they're sitting at the bar, right? And he initially says, "Can I get you a drink?" And he orders himself. And he's such a dick to this bartender, right? He's like, Jim Beam. And then he shows him how many fingers high he wants a Jim Beam. Ice. And then he shows him how big he wants the ice cube. And then water. And he shows him how much water he wants in it. And that's like, when people say like, I'll have 2 fingers of bourbon or 3 fingers. That's like a very old school way to measure how many ounces or how much booze you want. So he's like just a condescending asshole to this bartender.
Yeah. By the way, his only shots of him direct is him just having reactions
disdain.
And rolling his eyes.
Yeah,
and
just disdain.
Yeah, for everyone.
Yeah, and then Andie MacDowell says, I'll have sweet vermouth on the rocks with a twist. Mm-hmm. Maybe, listen, I haven't been, in 93, I was 5, so I wasn't slinging drinks.
Yeah.
But sweet vermouth on the rocks with a lemon twist, Is it lovely? Sure, if you're above 85. But
is it bitter? Is it sweet? Like what's
so sweet vermouth is? Have you ever had a Manhattan or a Negroni?
I've had a Negroni. Yes.
Okay, so that is the other part that is equal to the Campari and the gin.
Okay.
So you've got Campari, gin, and then sweet vermouth. It is as sweetness, it's definitely going to be on the sweeter side. Very sweet.
I like sweet. All right.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, in this situation, I might be the dude. You might be the lady.
Okay.
Yeah, you might like this. I vote we go to a bar and we order these exact drinks.
Yeah.
And you'll probably like it, honestly.
Okay.
But when she orders that, I'm like, my insides are like, oh my God, you're going to feel like dick tomorrow, young lady.
Is it just like syrup at that point? I mean, what, like, is it? It's
a cordial. It's more effervescent. It's very, very, it's got a nice bouquet to the nose.
Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, I can't wait to pour you a glass of sweet vermouth now with a lemon twist. I really want you to drink it.
We should take stock, and you can make like a little like bar menu of
that is
all the
so
drinks.
Funny you said that. One of our listeners actually messaged me and said, I would love for you to make cocktails based on all the episodes you did, because I bet you they're hilarious. So we'll work on that. That's something.
Although I don't know if I would. I mean, if you have a Puppers, I'll take it. But if you have a Caesar. I don't know if I can't do it. I can't do it.
Neither one of us can.
No, vomit.
I'll toss that off to my partner because I'll vom.
Yeah.
I can't do it. And I will literally, full disclosure, when it comes to alcohol, you can feed me creme de menthe and I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll fucking drink it. I'll drink anything with alcohol content. But I don't know, sweet vermouth on the rocks with a twist kind of drew. I have some at my house right now. Some that's made in Brooklyn, New York. I might give it a go tonight just to Andie MacDowell it up. That really. Oh, and another fun fact that I loved, and this was not something that was like in any article. I had to really do research on this. The scenes where Andie MacDowell is just forever slapping Bill Murray in the face.
Probably her favorite scene to do.
Yes, and he said, he's like, well, he told me I had to really slap him. Like he wanted me to really do it. I think he's a little methody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she said she slapped him 10 times in the one scene. Just the one scene. Just one scene 10 times. Yeah. Hard.
Yeah.
And she even said, well, he was kind of a jerk, so it was pretty easy.
Has she come out and said that he was an asshole on
But
set?
she said she loved him, but he was kind of a jerk, so it made it easy. Maybe she meant the character was a jerk? I don't know.
I mean, maybe both. So who came out recently? Oh, it was another one of his co-stars came out recently. Gina Davis came out
Gina Davis.
and said, well, with Gina Davis, and this is where, again, and funny enough, I think it was around the same time frame. I gotta check that while I'm looking this up. But that was a movie he did, but it was like, I think it was like his directorial debut. It was the first movie he ever directed, which was far and beyond his least known movie. Maybe there's other stuff that he's like Razor's Edge. I don't know if a lot of people have seen. But it was Quick Change, which was
haven't seen it.
Great. It was a few years before this. That was 1990. It's an amazing movie. It's Bill Murray, Gina Davis, and Randy Quaid.
That's a really good little group there.
There's a bunch of other people in the movie as well.
I'm laughing because I just Googled this about. I'm gonna let you tell it, but please keep going.
I highly recommend this movie. Right. Side note: I'll get to what Gina Davis said that Bill Murray is an asshole. But I'll get back to that. This is Bill Murray, Gina Davis, and Randy Quaid are bank robbers. They're not. I shouldn't say. Let me back up a second. They're not bank robbers. They rob a bank because they're sort of like fed up with the city. It's a New York story. And they rob a bank because they're fed up with the city and are just going to take the money, run, and like go off to like the Bahamas or something and just, find a place to live on like a beautiful tropical island. Just get away from New York City. And spoiler alert, they spend the entire movie trying to leave New York and can't get out because New York sucks. You know how like, as we're talking about problematic men, like Woody Allen, people talk about Woody Allen movies and say like, oh, like, he has like a love story to New York City. Like his film is an homage to the city of New York.
He's a fucktard, but
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an homage to like the seedier, crappier, dirtier parts of New York City, but in like a funny way. It's showing you like the not clean streets of Brooklyn and Queens, especially in like the early 90s. It's great. And Tony Shalhoub randomly pops up in it, and he's hilarious in it.
That's fun.
So
I would love to watch it because I love Gina Davis in the 90s. I feel like she's such a fucking hot little dime piece badass.
My God. Yeah.
I love her.
That's Gina Davis for me. It was
not, I mean, like, I think everyone here knows that I have an inappropriate mouth, but I always, when I was little, this is a true story. I dreamed for natural boobs like Gina Davis's. Like every little girl has like a, or female presenting person that wanted to join, like have boobs naturally. Yeah. I was like, I just want to have boobs as big as Gina Davis's.
But where did you know Gina Davis from at that point?
When I decided I wanted those boobs.
Yeah.
Like it was an array, but I would say A League of Their Own really sold it for me.
Okay. All right.
Even though they were kind of pointy in that movie because that was the time period, but I was like, man, she's got good natural boobs.
Well, because
I was convinced that was going to happen for me. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But yeah, that's what I wanted.
Well, because I was going to say too, I mean, and again, talking about Gina Davis, I don't know, we'll get back to the movie we're actually talking about. But
you don't want to talk about Gina Davis's boobs anymore?
I will for hours, but I feel like
excellent.
As a man, you could talk about her boobs all you want. I start talking about it, we get into problematic territory.
That's fine. I got your back.
But I will say
also Casper Gina Davis, so hot, just for the record.
I was going to say, what really Earth Girls Are Easy was.
Okay.
I
didn't see that till adult time. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you also have the Beetlejuice. You have, Quick Change. I knew her from Thelma and Louise, A League of Their Own. Remember Hero? Do you remember that movie?
Oh, God. I don't want to talk about that movie.
That's the Dustin Hoffman, Gina Davis, Andy Garcia.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a great movie too. Yeah, Gina Davis was big there, but also
now that the whole point of this is talk about how she was attacked by Bill Murray, and I'm over here talking about her boobs. So I do apologize about how quickly this has turned.
I will just say I went through a redhead phase at a moment in my life, and
so did I.
I will
landed
attribute
on it
to the movie Earth Girls Are Easy with the dual redheads of Gina Davis and the writer of the movie, Julie Brown, which 80s Julie Brown. That's okay. I gotta get away from my
I went through a redhead phase and said yes to an engagement ring. So
yeah, your fiance is a redhead.
I'm furthering that line of redhead. They said they're going extinct, and I'm just doing my part for civilization. That's all.
Are you? You should go to him and be like, I think the reason I'm into you is because of Gina Davis, and just leave it at that.
He would be like, I think the reason I'm into you is Gina Davis too. I don't. Yeah. That's fine. But so to bring it back, Bill Murray was a real fucker to her on this movie, right? Like, because I googled it and it said that
right.
She was an asshole.
The thing is, and again, this was him directing the movie, and I think they also had to saddle him with a quote unquote real director so that he didn't, fall apart because he had never directed a movie before. So I think he was under a lot of pressure. Again, this, just to be clear, I'm not excusing it. I'm just trying to get into the psyche of Bill Murray and like his level. Because I feel like with Bill Murray, there are levels of him being an asshole. He's not just like, oh, wow, he's always been an asshole. It's just like sometimes he's very much like Phil in the beginning of the movie where he's just kind of like passive aggressively a dick versus like in your face, throwing the microphone down at the same time. Yeah.
I was watching it and I said that to my partner. I was like, I feel like this is the most Bill Murray character.
He wasn't acting at all.
We're a big Bill Murray fan house because Bill Murray is very big in the world of golf.
Yeah.
And our bills are paid by the world of golf. So we love golf.
Well, on that point, I feel like it's worth mentioning that in this movie, you have who's probably more of a golfer than Bill Murray himself is his brother.
Who's the mayor?
Brian Doyle Murray. Yeah. Who's,
I did not realize that was his brother. And we were watching it and my fiance was like, that's his brother.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I mean, I honestly have a bigger love for the Murray brothers for some reason. Because you have him, you have Joel Murray, do you know who Joel Murray is? Because if you don't, I'm going to say something you know him from.
Of course I do. And John, but John was an Edward. There's a lot of them. Good Lord. They really multiplied.
So Joel Murray is probably best known recently from his role in Mad Men, which is where...
Agreed, but I liked him in Dharma and Greg.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize,
Well,
he played Freddie Rumsen in he played Freddie Rumsen in Mad Men, not Dharma and Greg.
Mad Men, we have to do Mad Men because we both love Mad Men, but I want to rewatch if that's at all possible.
Pete Kavanaugh on Dharma and Greg for those playing the home game. I got to mention this too because there's someone else in the movie that I love. I'm looking at your face as I'm saying this, and I'm wondering if you're going to be on the same. He is also a very big part of 80s, early 90s movies, and I love this guy. And if anything, I've always wanted to grow up to be this man. I can barely pronounce his name, but the point is he's been in a lot of movies. Are we on the same page? Because I'm watching you smile, and I feel like you also love this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. He is, I'm going to run down all the things he's been in. He is the limo driver Henry in Blank Check. He is...
Oh my God, such a good movie.
He is the electrical grid guy in the hole in the ground in Die Hard. He is Art in The Burbs. He is Snick in Little Monsters. He is all these people in all these great movies. He's an Encino Man, Class Act, Loaded Weapon 1, Last Action Hero. I love that movie so much. That's another one we probably have to do at some point. Yeah, I can't pronounce his name, but he's in this movie. He's Gus, one of like the hick dummies who were sitting in the diner, who also go on the joyride with Bill Murray's character in the movie. Rick
Duckamun. I can't say it.
Yeah.
Duckamun.
Who I didn't realize passed away, which I know doesn't bring it down or now. I just watched I know this is an audio podcast, but I watched as Amanda's face went from joy. We both love this guy. He's important to us and our childhood.
I just got so sad.
And then I watched me just like punch your smile in the face and just destroy it. He died of complications from diabetes. He was in so many movies, but and that's the thing too, is like, you want to talk about like comedic actors. Like he had this like face that just stole the camera. Like he was I gotta say, in the scenes, and I don't know if it's like just me falling in love with this guy, but like when the scenes that they're together and like when they're in the car and the shot in Groundhog Day is like them lined up, the three of them aside, Bill Murray has his like, Bill Murray face over on the right, but I'm staring at Gus's face as he's just like has a smirk and is like, whoa boy, I'm not so into this. He's like, there's a rule. He's got, Bill Murray's like rattling off all the rules in life you're not supposed to break. And he's like, don't drive on the train tracks. He's like,
that's
what I agree with.
That one.
Yeah, that's what I agree with. And so anyway, just a great guy. I mean,
so good.
As an actor. I'm actually sad.
That was a sad roller coaster you took me on.
I'm so sorry.
Let's talk about Chris Elliott because we both do love him. And I am begging you that we do Schitt's Creek because that's one of my favorite shows of all time in the history of ever in the universe of all time. Yeah.
I will tell you, I grew up watching Chris Elliott in so many things, and I love the fact that he does not care about just being the gum that the shoe steps on in almost everything he's in.
He's the best.
Including Schitt's Creek. Yeah. He was originally, he was like a writer, and he did a bunch of comedic sketches for Late Night with David Letterman when he was on NBC back in the 80s. The Guy Who Lives Under the Bleachers, I think his title was, where he like was a character who just like lived under the audience bleachers, and that was his character. In the early 90s, he had a show called Get a Life on Fox.
That opening scene, like you have those moments where in your head, it's like if you were to go back in time and you can think of like the moment of my childhood where I'm like, yeah, this is it. I don't know why, but the theme song and him riding his bike in Get a Life and the opening credits, I was like, it's burned in my brain.
You know what's funny is not a lot of people know about that show. I wish more people did. It didn't last very long. I think it lasted 2 seasons.
2 or 3 years, right?
It's probably more well known for the fact that for the theme song they used "Stand" by REM. Mm-hmm. Brian Doyle Murray was also in that show, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm learning so much on this episode.
But what I was going to mention is when I think about this show, and it's going to be a real weird one, but do you remember the movie Freddy Got Fingered? The Tom Green movie?
Yes, I do. Oh, poor Tom Green, yeah.
Just that dynamic of like the son being a dummy and just like pissing off the father who's just like, get a job, just grow up and stop being stupid. that was this entire show. Like that, it feels like that movie like ripped off.
He was the paper boy in the show, wasn't he? I don't remember. Yeah.
He was. And then honestly, what's even funnier is my most vivid recollection. There's a random episode somewhere where he buys a submarine and he has to like put it in the bathtub. And so he just like installed a submarine in the bathtub in his parents' house, and his parents and his dad's all pissed. And I was like, as a kid, just being like, oh, that's so cool. He's got like, it's a grown adult doing stupid kid things, but that's what's hilarious about it to me. And then, yeah, he's got a
literally the only episode that I recall other than the theme song. Doesn't he do like an episode where he takes modeling classes? And like, I don't know. I just remember watching the episode and be like, this show is the best.
Yeah.
I was also kind of a latchkey kid. Like my mom worked overnights as a nurse and she was an ambulance driver. And my parents had just divorced and my sister had to go to a special school who was younger than me. So I was home a lot with a very lovely woman named Carmen who would just like forever be downstairs chain smoking cigarettes and left me do whatever I wanted and watch whatever I wanted. So I watched a lot of adult television when I was way too young to be watching it.
By the way, I want to mention I found the episode I recalled as a kid, and it was called Neptune 2000. It was the 20th episode in the first season, and it was when Chris was 12. He got a job as a paperboy so he can buy a submarine from an ad in the back of a comic book. Chris and his father put it together. However, when they embark on the sub's maiden voyage in Chris's bathtub, they become trapped. That was the point of the show. By the way,
I'm sold.
Writers on the show included people like Charlie Kaufman and Bob Odenkirk, right? Like, yeah. So anyway, it's
no wonder we liked it as such young little chicken nuggets.
But
he's very good in this, though. Don't you think his part is really very Chris Elliott-like?
He doesn't take Phil's crap. Keep in mind, like in the beginning of the movie, very beginning of the movie, he's the first person to like throw a jab at Phil, where Phil just like lets him have it. He's like, there's a network looking to, hire me. And he's like, yeah, the home shopping network. Just taking jabs at him from go.
Okay. Not to, again, get very deep with this episode, but for me, it felt like Chris Elliott and Phil had like Chris Elliott's character, I should say, and Phil. Yeah. They had like they had a relationship where, again, he could take shit from him.
Yeah. And
he wasn't put out by it. He was just like, oh, yeah, he can say whatever he wants. Like they've worked together for a long time. In my brain, that's kind of how I interpreted it. And then that scene where he drives the truck off the damn cliff, he could not care less. So I don't know if that shows like what a dick Bill Murray's character was. That he was just like, oh, yeah. He's like, oh, he was a really good guy. And I think it's more like he's kind of there. He teeters on creep in this movie, right? Like he's kind of a little bit creepy. He's just like excited to be, the solace for Andie MacDowell then. And then I want to say Karen maybe was her name in the.
Oh,
when he's like trying to get her to do whatever he wants to do with her, and then he goes to the boy auction and he only gets a quarter from the nice old lady.
2 bits.
Which 2 pants.
It's also the look he gives where he like covers his eyes like fuck. That's that thing's great. But that's the thing too, is like Chris plays that part so well, and I got to give it to him. One of my favorite movies of all time, by the way, was supposed to be like his breakout movie.
Snow Day. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
because it's Snow Day. It's a really good one.
Cabin Boy, which which is so great and so like it's Chris Elliott and he's being silly and I love it so much. He's a really funny dude.
Isn't Brian Murray in that as well?
If he is, it makes complete sense that these guys have worked together numerous times. I'm pretty sure he is.
I could be. I know Andy Richter's in it.
Yeah,
Chris
Brian Elliott is in it too. Yeah,
he is. Okay, yeah.
It was also famous because it was like one of the only movies that had a cameo from David Letterman. Which, by the way, I'm reading this now. Again, more rabbit holes. But it was originally supposed to be directed by Tim Burton.
Oh my! It would have been a very different movie.
But then Tim Burton was offered Ed Wood, so he took that one instead. So,
well,
womp. It would have been better if it was Tim Burton directing it. Maybe.
Probably.
I hope so.
Back to our original podcast. What would you do if you had one day to live? I have that question at the top of my notes. I'm like, what?
That is the question that Bill Murray asks in the movie. He's like, what would you do if you had one day to live, right? Which isn't really, that's a different question to me than what if you were living every day over and over again and could do whatever you wanted. So what is your question? What would I do if it was the last day?
Well, yeah, that's the question he poses. So I don't really like that one because it doesn't really match what the movie goes to. So what would you do if you were in, let's scratch it. What would you do if you were in Bill Murray's shoes?
If I was in Bill Murray's shoes, if I was in a time loop and
loop.
I will say, I think the thing that sticks out to me about this movie, and I am answering the question, I promise, but the thing that sticks out to me about this movie is I'm not a cold weather person. I don't enjoy like the cold, and we both live in the Northeast. So like it's not like we're alien to winters and snow and blizzards and things, but being stuck in a small town, because I think that's the key of it, right? Because you could say like, you know, what if I'm in New York City and I'm in a time loop? That's a very different question than what if you're stuck in a small town in Northwest Pennsylvania and with no communication to the outside world beyond the town and are stuck in that loop forever. It's a very different scenario, which I feel like you have to put yourself in that box because I think that's what makes obviously the point.
Okay. That's fair.
I feel like, and this is rare because everyone has opinions, but I'm like, I don't think the arc of the movie is that far off. I think it starts with like, oh, I'm going to do any kind of crazy crap I want to do, steal money, go buy things, you know, do not dirty. I'm not
You're going to 7 deadly sin it. You're going to do the lust and the gluttony and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I think my laziness keeps me away from being too much of a creep because I'm like, I couldn't do the same day over and over again and get like one little extra tidbit and then go back the next day and then start all over from scratch. Like that's commitment and time. And I'm like, I'm too lazy for that. I would just be like, oh, you drink to world peace? I screwed this up. All right, well, I'm done here. Like I'm just going to I'll go back to my room for 7 days and loop over and over again and just, you know, watch TV or whatever. But yeah, because I think you go through the same thing, right? It's like, I'm going to do whatever kind of sneaky, crappy stuff that you normally have consequences that you'll get caught with, and then eventually dive into loneliness. I'm not saying I would do this actively, like this is my plan. Knowing myself, I feel like this is what it would end up in. But to start off like, yeah, I mean, by the time you sort of accept, because it takes about 2 days for him to accept, oh, I'm in a time loop. I can do anything I want. Which I was like, that was too quick. You don't know the rules. We were watching the rules. My son was like, oh, he's 6 more weeks of winter. It's going to be like this for 6 weeks. So you don't know if you're going to wake up the next day and be out of your loop, which, and you'd have those consequences.
That's fair. That's completely fair. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I feel like I'd give it a couple loops, like maybe a week before I start trying to rob banks.
Armored trucks.
Yeah. Although he's not doing it at gunpoint, he's just kind of, you know, taking advantage of people looking the other way. Yeah, no one's going to notice. And it's also 1993, Northwest Pennsylvania, small town. They don't have cameras or anything. No one's going to even know that you're the guy who took it. But it's a hard question to answer. But I will say, I think I'd go down the similar rabbit hole. But at the same time, like, I don't know if I have the commitment to just be like, oh, well, I'm just going to learn the piano for the rest of my life because I'm living the same day over and over again. But I will say, I think the hardest part that I wouldn't be able to commit to is he still seemed to like get up, get dressed, go down and do the exact same, you know, camera stand up every single day. I'm like, man, it's any days in this time loop you just sleep in or just, you know, also, I mean, I know this breaks some of the rules of the movie and stuff, but I'm like, what if he just left then and there? Like they hit the storm because they do the report and wait until after breakfast. What if he just gets up at 6 and just immediately darts out and heads to the city? Or try the other thing too, he can't reach any outside lines because the quote unquote, the long distance lines are down because of the storm. Well, what if he just wakes up at 6 a.m. and makes a phone call? And try that. Anyway, I'm tearing apart the movie's logic now.
No. I thought the similar things was like, I would just get in the car and go. But also, I don't know. I feel like I'm too much of a bleeding heart. Sometimes I'd be like, oh my God, I would be able to do so much good for the world. But your good gets erased, right? In 24 hours.
Right.
So even if you are giving that adorable, sweet, perfect little homeless man his, chunk of cash, the following day, he doesn't have it. He's dead. Right. He's gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think I might, full disclosure, I would probably do a similar thing. Like, let's do all the bad shit that you've always wanted to do first. Yeah. And then I think I would go, I am a nerd, so I think I would go the reading books route. I think I would definitely do the piano thing. There's a lot of things that my delicious ADHD brain is like, I'm going to try this. And then I try it for 14 seconds and I'm like, not for me. So maybe I would stick some things out. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like the movie does a really good job of, maybe you wouldn't do the exact same thing, right? Because this is 1993. But
yeah,
I think I would really live on the high of being that person who does all the right things in one day because you've spent so much time learning what all the right things are. Like, we haven't even talked about this. What is his name that plays Fred, the groom?
Oh,
he's such a famous actor. Michael.
Wait, really?
The guy that plays Fred, the kid that gets married. He's something Shannon. Michael Shannon.
What?
Yeah, that's Michael Shannon.
Oh, really?
Yes, Fred.
I did not
Groundhog
know that.
It's Michael Shannon.
That's
I noticed it right away. So, like, the way that Michael Shannon thanks him and then he gets some tickets to WrestleMania. I want to be that guy. My love language is gifts of service and giving to people. So I want to be the guy that gives all the stuff. So I would think I would live on that high for a while. But like you said, it's so fucking lonely. So how long could you live on that?
I mean, there's only so many times you can hook up with Nancy and then she forgets about you the next day and you have to start over from scratch.
Nancy. Yeah. I love the scene where he buys the baby blue Mercedes after robbing the armor truck and dresses up like she's the French maid. And she's like, I thought we were going to a costume party. Oh, yeah. Who is that woman? I mean, you don't know who she is, right? Because Nancy walks by. Yeah. Nancy walks by and is like, hey, Nancy. And she's like, I don't know you.
Where did you meet that woman?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway.
So I don't know. Okay. So that's the question of the movie. And we both would probably end up being degenerates to start and have to work our damn way out. We're both making out with Andie MacDowell about an ice sculpture.
Yeah. No,
and then you get that twinkling music.
I wouldn't make it out of the time loop. Andie MacDowell is too much work. I couldn't do that. And that was the thing too, is I did have that thought also of he figures his way out in I guess one day to figure out how to hook up with Nancy. It takes him multiple attempts to try to hook up with Andie MacDowell and he keeps failing. And I'm like, all right, dude, at some point you gotta admit that she doesn't want this at all. So even you doing all this, trying to line it up to make it work.
Oh, watching that now as an adult, I was like, what a fucking creep. Yeah. Also, way to just paint a woman as just saying, I love you. He's known you for 12 hours. Yeah. No woman would be like, oh my God, you love me. And you've called me another woman's name 3 times, but I'm still just going to have sex with you. Yeah. And he's like, I want to marry you. And she's like, oh my God, Phil. No, you're getting punched in the penis and I'm leaving your room and probably stealing something on the way out.
Yeah. Good on you.
I know. That's right. Yeah. It was the 90s.
Yeah.
The 90s.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I wish I had a better answer, but in all fairness, I'm just
we just need to drink that Punxsutawney Phil Groundhog punch and live forever, I guess.
Well, because I there's no judgment here, and I wouldn't be afraid to mention it if I felt that way, but I'm not in the vein of oh yeah, cool. I just keep trying to hook up with Andie MacDowell until she didn't know any better, and I tricked her into sleeping with me. Not my jam. And then otherwise, I'm there's nothing else that I'm I really want to do this or could accomplish that or have enough willpower to keep at it and trying to learn how to do things. So
I'd read books and get real fat. Probably not because you don't
what I'm doing now.
Get any calories. I would just read books all fucking day.
Yeah.
I wish Harry Potter smut existed back then. I'd be so happy if I could just read that all day.
Just lock yourself in your
lock
bed
myself
and
breakfast. Into that creepy ass bed and breakfast.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you know what, guys? This episode is releasing on Groundhog Day, so
yeah.
Happy Groundhog.
Happy Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
See you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.